this presentation, I'm going to share some of my research into early reading. I'll begin with my PhD. I interviewed 11 mothers to find that they all read picture storybooks with their 2-year-old children on a daily basis. All of the children were familiar with electronic texts, whether it was an iPad or iPhone and the like, though they were mostly used when their mothers were otherwise occupied or to occupy the children when they were out and about. They mainly used the devices to watch favourite programs like Thomas the Tank Engine or to play interactive games. The mothers read to the children for educational purposes, but they also read with their children so they could spend quality time together, cuddle and bond, or to help transition to a calmer frame of mind just before sleep. The 2 videos I'm about to show you are quite typical of what I saw across participant groups.
Here is the band Sheep. What's he playing? Do you know some of those instruments?
Yeah.
What do you know? Which one do you know? Guitar.
And the trumpet.
Mm.
And what's this one?
That looks like a metallophone. You have one of those at home, don't you? It's colourful. And here is the clown sheep. Who can juggle? Mummy or daddy?
Mommy.
Mummy can juggle.
And daddy can juggle.
He can juggle a little bit. He tries, doesn't he?
And I'm juggle.
You can, you have a good go at it, don't you? Like that.
My food.
With your fruit and your plastic eggs.
And I try to daddy.
Juggle. That's right.
And Mama tries to do it.
Does she? Does she do it well?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Now compare that printed text reading to this reading of an electronic text.
A bear and a hare.
Puppy.
You can touch it. Have been to a fair, but not the hippopotamus. Oh. And what about if you touch the balloons or the ice cream? What happens? Oh, it's floating away. Oh, another balloon. It's a bit special, isn't it? Ooh, lots of balloons. Shall we count all those balloons? You want to count all them together, or you just like watching them float?
I like that.
Just watching them float, okay. Good, all right, let's turn the page.
As expected with reading proficient mothers, the mothers never engaged in a straight reading of the text. They always went beyond, or tried to go beyond, trying to engage their children in talk about the text. Whether it was labelling objects in the illustrations, making connections to the child's lived experiences, or getting them to talk about the objects or characters featured in the text or illustrations. However, the mothers themselves felt that they were competing for their children's attention, competing against the toys in the room when reading printed texts, and against the hotspots that were embedded in the electronic texts. Some even commented that that's why they like engaging in shared reading as part of a bedtime routine, and why they purposefully chose printed texts. They can make sure that there are no distractions when their children are tucked into bed or on their laps. And given that their child can't read yet, their child is dependent on them to read the book when the book is a printed text. So there's a greater chance that they'll listen, engage in conversation, and not try to take over. Another key finding was that even the mothers felt distracted by the electronic features of the ebook. They found that they were interacting with the features of the text or pointing out the functional features of the ebook, which meant that the focus on storyline was disrupted. In watching the videos, I also noted that the mothers didn't gesture when reading the printed words of the ebooks, even though they gestured a lot when reading the printed words of the picture storybooks. This last point was of particular interest to me in light of research that's found that children have a wider range of vocabulary knowledge upon school entry when their parents gesture while speaking with them, whether they're pointing to an object or mimicking a key feature of the word, such as moving their hand upwards when saying the word tall. This research helped me to reflect on the fact that even though there will be children who will begin school with some knowledge of how to operate electronic texts, it won't necessarily be guided knowledge in the same way that they've been guided to learn how to read and talk about printed texts. And that for very young children, when expanding vocabulary is the main aim, Printed picture storybooks are probably more conducive to encouraging children to talk about texts than ebooks. A time when electronic texts can be very helpful is to support children to learn keywords or knowledges through interactive fun repetition, which means that more of the precious time children spend with adults can be devoted to contextualizing the use of those key knowledges rather than devoting too much time on practices such as learning letter sounds by rote. Which brings me to my next project. Along with vocabulary, another key predictor of early reading success for young children is letter knowledge. By letter knowledge, we don't mean that young children are expected to memorize all of the 460 plus different ways that the letters of the alphabet can be combined to represent the 44 units of sound that we use in the English language. With very young children, what we're looking for is to see if they've acquired the understanding that the letters of the alphabet are symbols that represent sound in words. To help children to acquire this knowledge, we start small by helping children to recall the 26 letter symbols of our English alphabet and to learn that those letters can represent sounds in words, beginning with the 26 most common sounds. Many children will pick this up quickly through home experiences such as shared reading and explicit teaching in the first year of school. However, some children find it difficult to develop a basic understanding of the alphabetic principle and to link each letter symbol to its most common sound. You can see from the images on the screen that if you were to say that the letter S represents the sound S in snake, a snake in its natural habitat looks very different to the letter S. Other memories may interfere, as I've shown with this example of a hose. Or it would just be too difficult for the child to create a direct link in their memory between the letter symbol and the sound that it's to represent. Young children are typically quite concrete in their thinking, and what we're asking them to do in learning letter symbols is a very abstract form of thinking. Yet use of images in their natural form is the way that most commercially available alphabet charts are created. They use disassociated images, either shown next to the letter or integrated with the letter in some way. Other researchers found that form-taking letters, like the snake created in the form of the letter S, can help children to create a link between the two in their memory, helping them to recall the most common sound that each letter represents on demand. We wanted to test this theory out, however, and that's how our study into a phonics app came to be. I worked with colleagues, including colleagues from the School of IT here at Deakin, to create an alphabet app that made use of form-taking letters. You'll see on this screen that the cat took on the shape of the letter C. The bat took on the shape of a lowercase letter b, and so on. The app had various modes. There was a matching game, a memory game, a gallery where each letter and/or image was shown on its own, and even an explorer mode where the teacher could display QR codes in the children's physical environment and the children would have to select the objects that match the letter on their screens. The app also went through levels of difficulty, from helping the children to learn the names of each object, for example, a numbat, a cat, a flamingo, and so on. We didn't want to assume that the children knew what those objects were, to matching the letter sound to its picture, matching the letter to its picture, matching the spoken sound to its picture, and matching the letter to a different font. The teacher section had a feature that allowed the teacher to monitor and track each child's progress when moving through each mode as an assessment. With this study, one classroom teacher used this app as a small group independent activity when she was taking a small group of children during guided reading. The children who used the app were engaged in self-directed activity at these times. We compared her class's outcomes with the children in the class next door, who, instead of using the app, engaged in a daily whole group recall activity where the teacher pointed to each letter on a randomised picture chart as the children and she called out the most common sound for each letter. The study found that the outcomes for both classes were comparable, showing that an app like this can be given to children as a small group activity when the teacher is working with another group of children, freeing the teacher to devote more time to contextualised teaching, rather than spending too much time on rote learning, especially for children who already have this basic knowledge and are ready to move on. And this brings us to the last study I wanted to share with you. While there are children who are ready to move on and we need to be conscious of not holding them back by wasting precious classroom learning time on knowledges they already possess, we also don't want to rush children who need to spend more time developing foundational knowledges that are critical to later reading success, whether it's revising letters that have been introduced in previous weeks or months, or phonological awareness. In a study conducted with over 5,000 early childhood and primary school teachers across Victoria, we found that school readiness was a key concern for teachers from both sectors for successful transition to school, with many preschool teachers feeling pressured to prepare children for academic readiness, including learning the letters of the alphabet. In a smaller study with 9 preschool teachers who taught 2 to 3-year-olds, we found that while the teachers read stories to the children and planned for activities that would expand the children's vocabulary and conversational skills, the teachers also devoted time to teaching the children the letters of the alphabet, but planned to devote little to no time on rhyme, syllables, or phonemic awareness. This doesn't mean that they didn't do so incidentally, such as when reading a book that rhymes, but it was interesting to hear that they didn't plan to explicitly focus on those capabilities in their day-to-day teaching. These 3 studies help to highlight how important it is that we not make assumptions about our students, but rather get to know our children well when planning for teaching and learning. We don't want to assume that children who have reading proficient parents have had guided experiences in how to use a wide range of electronic texts, or even a wide range of printed text types for that matter. We don't want to assume that exposure to each letter, perhaps 1 letter a week, will be enough to help each child to acquire basic understanding of the alphabetic principle. Some children will need more time and more specialised support. We also can't assume that children will have strong oral language proficiencies upon school entry. Some children will need further support developing their phonological awareness skills, learning to identify syllables, onsets, rhyme and phonemes in spoken language, or even to expand their vocabulary knowledge to provide them with the foundational skills needed to be successful in acquiring a basic understanding of the alphabetic principle and to expand on that knowledge so they can ultimately decode texts and, more importantly, understand the meaning of the text that they read. And lastly, we don't want to assume that all children in their first year of school will need to learn the letters of the alphabet. Some will be ready to appreciate that letters can represent a variety of different sounds in words. In short, it's important to take the time to get to know all of your students and use that knowledge to plan for teaching and learning experiences that will meet the needs of all of the children that you teach.